Thrix stared at the communication console in disbelief. The human captain who was supposed to have fled the system was speaking directly into his command center, through channels that should have been impossible to access. "You're supposed to be gone," Thrix said, fighting to keep his voice steady. Morrison's reply came with what sounded like amusement. "We never left, War Commander. We just became harder to find. I'm calling to offer you a chance to withdraw your forces before this situation becomes more unpleasant for everyone involved. You're in no position to make demands, human. I have 40,000 troops on this planet, and I have 6 soldiers who know how to use them against you." Morrison replied calmly. "Let me ask you something, Thrix. How many of your vehicles are currently operational?" Thrix checked his tactical display and felt a chill run down his spine. Over 60% of his ground vehicles were listed as disabled due to various mechanical failures. His logistics officer had been reporting increasing maintenance problems all week. "How many of your communication arrays are functioning properly?" Morrison continued. "How many of your soldiers got a full night's sleep last night? How many of your supply runs arrived on schedule?" Each question hit like a physical blow. Thrix's invasion force was being systematically degraded by an enemy he could not locate or engage directly. His overwhelming numerical advantage meant nothing against opponents who refused to fight conventionally. "What do you want?" Thrix demanded. "Simple," Morrison said. "Pack up your troops and leave. Take your ships, take your equipment, and never come back. Do that and nobody else has to die. And if I refuse?" There was a long pause before Morrison answered. "Then we continue what we've been doing until you change your mind." "We have all the time in the world, War Commander, do you?" The communication ended, leaving Thrix staring at a dead channel. He had been fighting wars for 30 years and had never encountered anything like this. The humans were not trying to defeat his army in battle. Instead, they were slowly strangling his ability to function as an occupation force. Over the following days, the harassment campaign intensified. Korthak patrols found themselves lost when their navigation systems were mysteriously reprogrammed. Supply convoys broke down when critical components were removed from their vehicles during routine stops. Guard posts lost power when their generators were sabotaged in ways that required hours to repair. The psychological pressure was even worse than the physical attacks. Korthak soldiers began reporting that they felt watched constantly. Equipment would be moved slightly during the night, just enough to notice. Personal items would disappear and reappear in different locations. Food supplies would be contaminated with harmless but foul-tasting compounds. Sergeant Alex Turner led a nighttime raid on an ammunition depot that demonstrated the humans' tactical sophistication. His team infiltrated the facility without triggering any alarms, planted explosives with surgical precision, and escaped before the charges detonated. The explosion destroyed the depot while leaving nearby buildings untouched. Security recordings showed nothing useful. The attackers had moved through blind spots in the surveillance system with perfect timing and knowledge of guard rotations. They had used Korthak uniforms and equipment, making identification impossible even when cameras did capture movement. Corporal Nina Santos focused on turning the aliens' own technology against them. Her engineering background allowed her to reprogram defensive systems so they would target Korthak vehicles instead of threats. She modified communication arrays to broadcast false information and altered supply distribution computers to create artificial shortages. The most disturbing incident occurred when a full squad of Korthak soldiers reported seeing human figures in their peripheral vision, only to find nothing when they turned to look directly. The figures appeared to be watching them from impossible distances and vanished the moment anyone tried to approach. Medical scans showed the soldiers were not hallucinating. Something was actually there, but using technology or techniques that made direct observation extremely difficult. The psychological impact was severe as troops began to doubt their own senses and question what was real. Thrix called his senior officers to an emergency briefing. The mood in the command center was grim as reports came in from across the planet. His supposedly unstoppable invasion force was being reduced to ineffectiveness by half a dozen humans using tactics no military academy had ever taught. "Status report," he demanded. 40% equipment. Failure rate, his logistics officer reported. Supply efficiency down 60%. Communication reliability at 30% and falling. Medical reports show widespread stress reactions among troops. Casualties? Surprisingly low, his medical officer admitted. Only 87 killed in 3 weeks of operations. But we have over 400 soldiers requesting psychological evaluation and another 600 reporting various stress-related illnesses. Thrix found the casualty figures almost more disturbing than if they had been higher. The humans were clearly capable of killing many more of his soldiers, but were choosing not to. Instead, they were demonstrating that they could strike anywhere at any time, while keeping their enemies alive to suffer the psychological consequences. They're playing with us, he realized aloud. This isn't about defeating our forces. It's about proving they can defeat us whenever they choose. His intelligence officer nodded grimly. The attacks show perfect knowledge of our procedures and capabilities. They know our patrol schedules, our communication protocols, and our supply routes. Someone has been studying us very carefully. But how? We've been on this planet for less than a month. They were studying us before we arrived, his tactical officer suggested. These humans must have access to detailed intelligence about Korthak military operations. They know exactly how we think and how we fight. Thrix considered this possibility and did not like what it implied. If the humans had such detailed knowledge of Korthak tactics, they might have been preparing for this confrontation for years. The rescue of this one planet could be part of a larger strategy he did not understand. The next phase of operations began when Morrison made contact again. This time he did not use the communication system. Instead, Thrix found a handwritten note on his desk when he arrived at his office in the morning. The security recordings showed no one entering or leaving the room. The note was simple. Your move, War Commander. Thrix realized the humans had infiltrated his most secure facility and could have killed him while he slept. The fact that they had chosen to leave a note instead was both a mercy and a threat. They were demonstrating their capabilities while offering him another chance to withdraw. The psychological warfare reached its peak when Morrison's team orchestrated their most audacious operation. They infiltrated the main Korthak supply base during a shift change and systematically disabled every piece of equipment in the facility. When the base commander arrived the next morning, he found his entire operation shut down but not a single soldier harmed. The message was clear. The humans could have killed everyone in the base but had chosen not to. They were not interested in slaughter but in proving a point. They wanted Thrix to understand that his occupation could be ended at any time they chose. Thrix found himself facing a decision no military academy had prepared him for. He could continue the occupation and watch his forces slowly degrade under constant harassment, or he could admit defeat to an enemy he had never actually fought in direct battle. The final straw came when half his remaining vehicles broke down simultaneously due to what appeared to be a computer virus that had infected their control systems. The virus displayed a simple message on every screen: time to go home. Thrix realized he was not fighting a military campaign anymore. He was trapped in a psychological war against opponents who understood his weaknesses better than he did himself. The humans were not trying to destroy his army, but to convince him that victory was impossible. As he stared at the tactical displays showing his degraded forces, Thrix finally understood what made these humans different from every other species he had encountered. They did not fight for honor or glory or territory. They fought to win, using whatever methods were most effective regardless of military tradition or conventional warfare doctrine. For the first time in his career, War Commander Thrix began to consider the possibility of retreat. The human ship dropped out of hyperspace exactly when Captain Morrison had promised. Lyra watched from the orbital monitoring station as the vessel appeared on their screens. Her first reaction was disappointment. The ship was smaller than she had expected. It looked nothing like the massive warships of other galactic powers. The hull was dark gray and covered with strange angles that seemed designed to scatter sensor beams. There were no obvious weapon ports or shield projectors visible from the outside. "Is that really a military vessel?" asked her aide, staring at the display screen. Lyra was wondering the same thing. The ship looked more like a cargo hauler than a warship. She had hoped the humans would bring something impressive to fight the Korthak. Instead, they had sent what appeared to be a single scout ship. The human captain requested permission to land at the main spaceport. Lyra granted the request and ordered her security team to meet the humans with full diplomatic honors. Whatever their ship looked like, these beings had traveled across the galaxy to help when no one else would. An hour later, Lyra stood on the landing platform watching the human shuttle touch down. The craft was even smaller than their main ship and looked just as unremarkable. When the hatch opened, she got her first look at the species that had answered their call for help. Captain Morrison stepped out first. He was shorter than most Zilani and his skin was a pale pink color. His hair was brown and cut very short in what Lyra assumed was a military style. He wore a simple green uniform with few decorations. Behind him came a female human who was introduced as Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez. Lyra had expected the humans to look more impressive. These two seemed almost fragile compared to the massive Korthak warriors she had seen in intelligence photos. Morrison was friendly and polite, but there was something in his eyes that made her uncomfortable. It was not cruelty or anger, but rather a cold calculation that seemed out of place in such a peaceful-looking being. The formal meeting took place in the council chambers. Morrison and Rodriguez sat across from the 12 Zilani leaders, while data screens showed the approaching Korthak fleet. Lyra explained the situation in detail, emphasizing how outmatched they were. 47 warships carrying invasion forces, she said. Their commander is War Commander Thrix, who has conquered 12 worlds without a single defeat. Our population is completely civilian with no military training or weapons. Morrison listened carefully and asked specific questions about Korthak tactics and equipment. His queries seemed random to Lyra. He wanted to know about local weather patterns, industrial facilities, and the planet's communication network. He also asked for detailed maps showing every road, tunnel, and building on the planet. "What exactly are you planning?" Elder Koss asked. Morrison's expression remained neutral. "We specialize in a particular type of warfare. We need to understand the terrain and infrastructure before we can develop an effective strategy." "But you only have one ship," protested another council member. "How can you possibly fight an entire invasion fleet?" "We don't plan to fight their fleet directly," Morrison replied. "That would be suicide. We have a different approach." Lieutenant Rodriguez spoke for the first time. "Captain, perhaps we should explain our capabilities to our hosts." Morrison nodded. "The Earth Defense Force has extensive experience with asymmetric warfare. We've learned how to fight enemies who are bigger, stronger, and better equipped than we are. The key is not to fight them on their terms, but to force them to fight on ours." Lyra did not understand what he meant, but something in Morrison's tone made her believe he was serious. The humans seemed completely confident despite the overwhelming odds they faced. "What do you need from us?" she asked. "Complete cooperation," Morrison said. "When the Korthak arrive, your people must follow our instructions exactly. No questions, no delays, no attempts to negotiate. If you trust us, we might be able to save your world." Over the next 2 days, the humans worked with incredible efficiency. Morrison's team studied every piece of information the Zilani could provide. They memorized maps, analyzed weather reports, and inspected key facilities. Rodriguez interviewed Zilani engineers and technicians, learning how their systems worked. The humans also brought supplies from their ship. Lyra was surprised to see that most of the equipment looked crude compared to standard galactic technology. There were simple explosives, basic communication devices, and what appeared to be primitive weapons. She began to wonder if the humans really understood what they were up against. Morrison noticed her concern during one of their planning sessions. "I know our gear doesn't look impressive," he said, "but sometimes the simplest tools are the most effective. The Korthak expect to face advanced military technology. They won't be prepared for what we're bringing." "Which is what exactly?" Lyra asked. Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "Chaos." On the third day, long-range sensors detected the Korthak fleet entering the outer system. 47 ships arranged in perfect military formation, moving toward Kepler 442b with unstoppable momentum. War Commander Thrix broadcast the standard demand for surrender within 6 hours or face complete destruction. Morrison gathered the Zilani leadership for a final briefing. "The invasion will begin in 18 hours, he said. "By that time, all civilians must be in the designated safe zones we've prepared. Your government will surrender unconditionally when the Korthak make their demands." "Surrender?" Elder Koss looked shocked. "But we called for help to fight them." "Fighting them directly would accomplish nothing except getting everyone killed," Morrison explained. "The Korthak are too strong for conventional resistance, but once they land and begin occupation procedures, they become vulnerable in ways they don't understand." Lyra still had doubts about the human plan. "What happens after we surrender? How do you expect to defeat an occupation force with just a few soldiers?" Morrison's expression became serious. Commander, has your species ever fought a guerrilla war? Lyra shook her head. The term was unfamiliar to her. Then you're about to learn something new about warfare, Morrison said. The Korthak think in terms of armies and battles. They understand conquest and occupation. What they don't understand is how to fight an enemy that refuses to fight fair. Lieutenant Rodriguez activated a holographic display showing the planet's surface. Red markers indicated Korthak landing zones while blue markers showed human positions. We won't be defending cities or holding territory, she explained. We'll be everywhere and nowhere. Strike fast, hit hard, and disappear before they can respond. But there are only 6 of you, Lyra protested. Morrison nodded. 6 humans who have spent their entire military careers learning how to kill efficiently. We're not here to win glorious battles. We're here to make the occupation so costly and chaotic that the Korthak will eventually decide your planet isn't worth the trouble. As the meeting ended, Lyra realized that the humans operated by completely different rules than any other species she had encountered. They did not seek honor in battle or glory in victory. They simply wanted to win using whatever methods worked best. The next morning, she watched Morrison's team make final preparations. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking equipment and reviewing plans. There was no ceremony or speeches, just soldiers preparing to do their job. When the Korthak fleet reached orbit and began broadcasting surrender demands, Morrison gave the order to begin the operation. The Zilani government formally surrendered and began evacuating civilians to the designated safe zones. As the first Korthak ships entered the atmosphere, Morrison and his team simply vanished. One moment they were in the command center and the next they were gone, along with all their equipment. Even Lyra's best sensors could not locate them anywhere on the planet. The real war was about to begin, and the Korthak had no idea what they were walking into. War Commander Thrix stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the planet below through the main viewing screen. Kepler 442b looked peaceful and green, exactly like the intelligence reports had described. The Zilani had surrendered without firing a single shot, which made this one of the easiest conquests of his career. Landing zone secured, War Commander, reported his tactical officer. All primary targets are under our control. Resistance is minimal to non-existent. Thrix nodded with satisfaction. The Korthak invasion had proceeded exactly according to plan. 40,000 troops had landed at strategic points across the planet, while orbital weapons remained targeted at major cities to prevent any uprising. Within 12 hours, they had achieved complete military control. The Zilani leadership had been pathetically cooperative. They had provided detailed maps of their cities, lists of important facilities, and even helped coordinate the civilian evacuations. Thrix had never seen a species surrender so completely and quickly. What about that human ship? He asked his intelligence officer. It departed the system 6 hours ago, War Commander. Our sensors tracked it leaving at high speed toward the galactic rim. The humans appear to have abandoned the Zilani when they realized the odds against them. Thrix was not surprised. Most species talked about helping others until they actually faced the Korthak military. The humans had probably taken one look at his fleet and decided discretion was better than suicide. Begin standard occupation procedures, he ordered. I want mining operations established within 72 hours. These soft creatures will work efficiently or they will not work at all. The first 3 days of occupation went smoothly. Korthak engineers began surveying mineral deposits while security forces rounded up the civilian population for work assignments. The Zilani offered no resistance and seemed resigned to their fate as slaves. Thrix was reviewing production schedules when the first incident occurred. A communication array on the northern continent went offline without warning. The technical team investigating the failure found that critical components had been removed with surgical precision. No guards had been harmed and no alarms had been triggered. Equipment failure? Thrix asked his chief engineer. Negative, War Commander. Someone with detailed knowledge of our systems deliberately sabotaged the array. The damage pattern suggests professional military training. Thrix frowned but did not consider the incident seriously threatening. Perhaps some Zilani had military knowledge they had not disclosed. His forces would need to be more careful about security, but it was hardly a major concern. The second incident came 8 hours later. A supply depot exploded in the middle of the night, destroying ammunition and equipment worth millions of credits. Again, the security teams found no trace of the attackers. The explosion had been triggered by a device that used Korthak military explosives in a configuration no Zilani should have understood. How many casualties? Thrix demanded. 12 dead, 31 wounded, his medical officer reported. The blast was precisely calculated to maximize damage to equipment while targeting off-duty personnel barracks. Now Thrix was concerned. The Zilani were supposed to be pacifists with no military knowledge. These attacks showed sophisticated understanding of Korthak procedures and equipment. Someone was conducting professional sabotage operations against his forces. Double all security patrols, he ordered. I want every Zilani settlement searched for weapons and explosives. Execute any civilian found with military equipment. The searches turned up nothing. The Zilani seemed genuinely shocked by the attacks and claimed no knowledge of who might be responsible. Their leaders cooperated fully with the investigations and even helped coordinate additional security measures. Then the attacks escalated. Over the next week, Thrix's forces faced an invisible enemy that struck without warning and vanished without trace. Communication systems failed at critical moments. Transport vehicles broke down due to precise sabotage. Guard posts were attacked by unseen assailants who killed sentries and disappeared before reinforcements arrived. The psychological impact was devastating. Korthak soldiers began reporting equipment malfunctions, supply shortages, and communication failures. Morale plummeted as the seemingly unstoppable invasion force encountered an enemy they could not locate, predict, or understand. Thrix called an emergency meeting with his senior officers. Status report, he demanded. 37 separate incidents in the past week, his security chief reported. 68 casualties, extensive equipment damage, and severe disruption of operations. The attackers appear to have detailed knowledge of our procedures and access to our supply lines. Who is responsible? Unknown, War Commander. We have found no evidence of organized resistance among the Zilani population. Our interrogations suggest they are as confused as we are. Thrix studied the tactical displays showing attack locations. The incidents followed no obvious pattern and seemed to target different types of facilities randomly. Whoever was conducting these operations understood psychological warfare as well as military tactics. Could this be the work of those humans who fled the system? His intelligence officer consulted his reports. Impossible, War Commander. Our sensors confirmed their departure. Besides, the ship carried only a handful of individuals. Even if they had remained, they could not conduct operations of this scope. But Thrix was beginning to suspect otherwise. The attack showed a level of professional military competence that the Zilani clearly did not possess. The tactics were unlike anything in the Korthak military database, which suggested an alien approach to warfare. Scan the system again, he ordered. Search for any sign of human presence. The sensor sweeps found nothing. If humans were still in the system, they were using technology or techniques that could defeat Korthak detection systems. For a species supposedly primitive by galactic standards, that seemed unlikely. The next attack convinced Thrix that he was facing something unprecedented. A team of his best soldiers conducting a routine patrol in armored vehicles simply vanished. When search teams found the vehicles 12 hours later, they were empty and undamaged. The soldiers were gone without any sign of struggle or combat. 3 days later, the missing soldiers reappeared at a Korthak checkpoint, unconscious but unharmed. They had no memory of what had happened to them, or who had taken them. Medical scans revealed they had been drugged with compounds unknown to Korthak science. This is impossible, Thrix's chief medical officer reported. The drug compounds are completely alien to our database. Whoever created them has access to advanced biochemical knowledge and the ability to synthesize complex molecules. Thrix was forced to admit what he had been trying to deny. Someone with advanced military training and sophisticated technology was conducting a systematic campaign against his occupation forces. The Zilani were clearly not responsible, which meant another species was involved. The psychological warfare aspect became clear when his soldiers began receiving messages through their communication systems. The messages were brief and delivered in perfect Korthak language with correct military terminology. You are not welcome here, one message read. Leave now or face consequences beyond your imagination. Another message was even more direct. We know where you sleep, what you eat, and when you are vulnerable. We are watching everything you do. The messages were impossible to trace and appeared to come from within the Korthak communication network itself. Someone had infiltrated their most secure systems and was using them to deliver threats directly to individual soldiers. Thrix realized he was facing an enemy unlike any he had encountered in his long military career. The attackers did not seek glorious battle or territorial control. They did not attempt to defend fixed positions or protect specific resources. Instead, they seemed focused on making the occupation as difficult and costly as possible through persistent, intelligent harassment. War Commander, his aide reported nervously. We are receiving a direct communication request from an unknown source. Put it through, Thrix ordered. The voice that came through the speakers spoke clear Korthak, but with an accent Thrix did not recognize. War Commander Thrix, this is Captain Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. I believe we need to talk. The morning sun cast long shadows across the green fields of Kepler 442b when Commander Lyra Voss received the message that would change everything. She stood in her office high above the capital city, watching the gentle Zilani farmers tend their crops in the valley below. The peaceful scene made what she had just learned even more terrible. Her aide rushed into the room carrying a data pad. His face was pale and his hands shook as he handed her the device. Lyra read the intelligence report twice before the full meaning hit her. The Korthak hegemony was coming for their world. The Korthak were monsters in the truest sense. These insectoid creatures stood twice as tall as any Zilani, and their bodies were covered in natural armor that could stop most weapons. They had conquered 17 worlds in the past 5 years, stripping each planet of its resources before moving on to the next target. What made them truly terrifying was not just their strength, but their complete lack of mercy. Lyra had seen the reports from other worlds. The Korthak would arrive with overwhelming force and demand immediate surrender. Those who resisted were killed without hesitation. Those who surrendered were enslaved and worked to death in mining operations. Children were separated from their families and raised as servants. The lucky ones died quickly. The Zilani had no real military to speak of. For over 1,000 years they had lived in perfect peace. Their greatest weapons were farming tools and their strongest ships were cargo vessels. They had never needed to fight because they had never met anyone who wanted to harm them. Lyra called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. The 12 members gathered in the crystal chamber beneath the government building. Each face showed the same expression of shock and fear. They all knew what the Korthak invasion meant for their people. Elder Koss spoke first. His voice was quiet and sad. How long do we have before they arrive? 3 weeks at most, Lyra replied. Our long-range sensors picked up their fleet 2 days ago. They are moving fast and heading directly for us. Can we evacuate the planet? Asked another council member. Lyra shook her head. We have cargo ships, but nothing that could move even a fraction of our population in time. Besides, where would we go? The Korthak would just follow us. The room fell silent. Everyone was thinking the same thing, but no one wanted to say it out loud. They were going to die, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. We have to ask for help, Elder Koss finally said. Send a message to every civilized species in the galaxy. Someone must be willing to help us. Lyra nodded and began composing the distress call. She made it simple and direct. The Zilani were a peaceful people facing extinction. They had no military and no weapons. The Korthak were coming to destroy them in 3 weeks. Anyone who could help was begged to respond immediately. The message went out on all frequencies and in every known language. Then they waited. For 3 days, the response was silence. Not one species replied to their plea for help. Lyra checked the communication systems over and over, hoping they had missed something. The equipment was working perfectly, but no help was coming. On the 4th day, several messages finally arrived. The Altarian Republic said they were too far away to send ships in time. The Vegan Empire was already fighting the Korthak on another front. The Centauri Federation offered their sympathy, but explained they could not risk war with such a powerful enemy. One by one, every major power in the galaxy found reasons not to help. Lyra felt despair settling over her like a heavy blanket. They had reached out to 43 different species and received nothing but polite refusals. The Zilani would face the Korthak alone. Then, on the evening of the 5th day, a new message arrived. The signal was weak and the translation software took several minutes to process the unfamiliar language patterns. When the text finally appeared on her screen, Lyra stared at it in confusion. The message came from something called the Earth Defense Force. The sender identified himself as Captain Jake Morrison, representing the human species. He confirmed that Earth had received the Zilani distress call and was preparing to send immediate assistance. Lyra had never heard of humans before. She ran a quick search through the galactic databases and found only basic information. Humans came from a small blue world on the outer edge of the galaxy. They had achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards, and their military capabilities were unknown. She read the message again, looking for some sign that this was a mistake. How could a species so young and so far away possibly help them against the mighty Korthak hegemony? The humans claimed they were sending a ship, but Lyra could not understand how a single vessel from such a primitive species could make any difference. Still, it was the only offer of help they had received. Lyra sent a reply thanking the humans and providing detailed information about the Korthak threat. She included everything they knew about the enemy fleet, their weapons, and their tactics. The human response came back within hours. Captain Morrison acknowledged the information and said his ship would arrive 3 days before the expected Korthak invasion. He also asked for detailed maps of the planet and information about evacuation routes for civilians. Lyra found the request strange. Why would the humans need evacuation plans? Were they planning to run away as soon as they saw the size of the Korthak fleet? The thought made her even more desperate. As the days passed, more Zilani learned about the coming human ship. Some were hopeful that salvation was on the way. Others worried that the humans would take one look at the odds and abandon them. A few wondered if the humans might have their own hidden agenda. Lyra tried to remain optimistic, but the facts were hard to ignore. One human ship against 47 Korthak warships. A primitive species against the most feared military force in the galaxy. Young soldiers against veteran conquerors who had never lost a battle. The night before the humans were scheduled to arrive, Lyra stood again at her office window. The city below was eerily quiet. Most families had already moved to the underground shelters. The streets were empty except for the occasional patrol of Zilani volunteers carrying improvised weapons. She thought about her own family. Her mate and their 2 children were safe in the deepest shelter, but she had chosen to remain at her post. As military commander, she would coordinate whatever defense they could manage. It would not be much, but she owed her people that much. Tomorrow the humans would arrive and they would learn what kind of help Earth had really sent. Lyra hoped for a miracle, but prepared for disappointment. In her heart, she feared that the humans would prove to be just another species unwilling to die for strangers. Thrix stood in his command center staring at reports that made no sense from a military perspective. His occupation force had been on Kepler 442b for 6 weeks and controlled none of it. On paper, he commanded 40,000 troops with advanced weapons and orbital support. In reality, he commanded a demoralized army that could barely maintain basic operations. The humans had not won a single conventional battle because they had never fought one. Instead, they had turned the entire planet into a weapon against his forces. Every system failed at critical moments. Every operation faced unexpected complications. Every soldier lived in constant stress waiting for the next invisible attack. War Commander, his communications officer reported nervously, "We're receiving another message from the human captain." "Put it through," Thrix ordered, dreading what Morrison would say this time. Morrison's voice came through clearly, speaking with the same calm confidence he had shown since the beginning. "Good morning, War Commander. I hope you've had time to consider our previous discussion about withdrawal options." "You cannot continue this indefinitely," Thrix replied, though he was no longer certain that was true. "My reinforcements will arrive within 2 weeks." "Will they?" Morrison asked. "Have you checked your long-range communications lately?" Thrix gestured to his technical officer, who ran a quick diagnostic. The man's face went pale as he reported that their main communication array had been offline for 3 days, without anyone noticing. The backup systems were functional, but someone had been editing outgoing messages to make them appear normal, while blocking requests for reinforcement. "You've been isolated for almost a week," Morrison continued. "Your superiors think everything is proceeding normally. They have no idea you're losing control of the occupation." The psychological impact hit Thrix like a physical blow. The humans had not only defeated his ground forces but had cut him off from support, without him realizing it. They were controlling information flow so completely that his own commanders did not know he needed help. "What do you want from me?" Thrix demanded. "The same thing I've wanted from the beginning," Morrison replied. "Take your forces and leave. Nobody else has to die, and you can tell your superiors that the planet proved too costly to hold. Everyone saves face and moves on with their lives. And if I refuse again, Morrison's tone became colder, then we move to the next phase of operations. So far we've been playing nice because we wanted to give you a chance to be reasonable, but our patience has limits, War Commander. The communication ended, leaving Thrix to wonder what the humans meant by next phase. He had assumed their harassment campaign was as aggressive as they intended to get. The possibility that they had been holding back was terrifying. He found out what Morrison meant the next morning when reports came in from across the planet. Every major Korthak installation had been hit simultaneously, in a coordinated strike that demonstrated capabilities far beyond anything the humans had shown before. Supply depots had been destroyed with precision explosives that left no collateral damage. Communication centers had been disabled by electromagnetic pulses that fried only Korthak equipment, while leaving Zilani systems untouched. Vehicle parks had been sabotaged so thoroughly that not a single transport was operational. The attacks had been carried out with perfect timing and coordination. Security recordings showed figures moving through installations like ghosts, completing their missions without triggering alarms or encountering guards. It was as if the humans could see and move through Korthak defenses without any effort. But the most disturbing discovery came when Thrix's aide reported that classified documents had been taken from his personal files. Intelligence reports, tactical assessments, and communication logs had been copied without leaving any trace of the breach. The humans now had detailed information about Korthak military operations that extended far beyond this single planet. "Sir," his intelligence officer said quietly, "if they can do this here, they can do it anywhere. Every Korthak installation in the galaxy could be vulnerable to these tactics." Thrix realized the implications immediately. The humans were not just fighting for this one world. They were demonstrating capabilities that could threaten the entire Korthak military structure. If word of this defeat spread, it could encourage resistance on every occupied planet. Morrison made contact again that evening with a message that confirmed Thrix's worst fears. "War Commander, you should know that we forwarded copies of your classified files to several resistance groups on other Korthak-occupied worlds. They're very interested in learning about your standard operating procedures." The strategic implications were staggering. The humans had turned this single operation into an intelligence-gathering mission that could undermine Korthak dominance across multiple star systems. They were not just fighting a local war, but conducting operations that could affect the balance of power in the entire region. "You're making an enemy of the entire Korthak hegemony," Thrix warned. "We made that choice the moment we decided to help the Zilani," Morrison replied. "The question now is whether you want to be the commander who lost an entire invasion force to 6 humans, or the one who made a tactical withdrawal when the situation became untenable." Thrix found himself facing a decision that would define the rest of his career. He could continue fighting an enemy he could not defeat using methods he did not understand, or he could admit that some battles could not be won through conventional force. The final confrontation came when Morrison arranged a face-to-face meeting. Thrix agreed, curious to finally see the human who had outmaneuvered his entire army. They met in a Zilani government building that had supposedly been under Korthak control for weeks. Morrison looked exactly as unremarkable as he had during their first meeting. He was still shorter than most species, still wore a simple uniform, and still carried himself with quiet confidence. But now Thrix could see what he had missed before. This human moved like a predator that had never encountered anything it could not kill. "You've made your point," Thrix said, "but you cannot expect me to simply abandon this operation because of harassment tactics." Morrison smiled, and this time there was warmth in the expression. "War Commander, I want to show you something." He activated a portable display that showed a tactical overview of the planet. Red markers indicated every Korthak position, while blue markers showed where human operatives were currently located. Thrix counted over 200 blue markers scattered across the planet. "That's impossible," Thrix said. "You only brought 6 soldiers. 6 soldiers who have been training Zilani volunteers for 6 weeks, Morrison explained. "The peaceful farmers you thought were helpless have been learning asymmetric warfare from species who wrote the manual on it." The display zoomed in to show detailed positions around major Korthak installations. Human-trained Zilani teams were positioned to strike every critical target simultaneously. The gentle herbivores had been transformed into a planet-wide resistance network. Every supply line, Every communication node, every barracks and vehicle park is targeted. Morrison continued. We can shut down your entire operation in less than 6 hours. The only question is whether you want to lose your army or save it. Thrix stared at the display and realized he had completely misunderstood the nature of this conflict. The humans had not come to fight his army. They had come to teach the Zilani how to fight it themselves. 6 human soldiers had multiplied their effectiveness by training hundreds of local volunteers. Why show me this? Thrix asked. You could have simply launched the attack. Morrison's expression became serious. Because we're not monsters, War Commander. We don't want to slaughter your soldiers if we can avoid it, but we will do whatever is necessary to protect the people who asked for our help. For the first time, Thrix began to understand what made humans truly dangerous. It was not their weapons or their tactics, but their absolute commitment to achieving their objectives regardless of the cost. They had turned a hopeless situation into certain victory through patience, intelligence, and complete ruthlessness in pursuit of their goals. If I withdraw, Thrix said slowly, what guarantee do I have that you won't use these tactics against other Korthak operations? None, Morrison replied honestly. But if you stay, you're guaranteed to lose everything. At least withdrawal gives you the chance to learn from this experience and adapt your methods for future operations. Thrix made his decision. 3 days later, the Korthak fleet departed Kepler 442b with most of its forces intact. Official reports described the withdrawal as a strategic redeployment, but every military officer in the fleet understood what had really happened. As the human ship prepared to leave, Lyra met with Morrison one final time. Will Earth help if we're threatened again? Morrison's answer captured everything the galaxy needed to know about humanity's approach to warfare. When peaceful people are threatened by those who mistake kindness for weakness, we'll be there. It's what we do. The story of Kepler 442b spread quickly through the galactic community. Other species learned that there was a new player in the game, one that fought by completely different rules.